Most people will never know this, but in a single week, in 1910, a group of men met on a secluded island, and the decisions they made there would shape the financial fate of the entire world. No cameras, no journalists, no public record beyond what was quietly filed. What they created was not a law, not a policy, but a blueprint for perpetual financial control. A system designed to keep nations in debt and citizens in servitude. This is still happening today, and every dollar in your pocket is part of that system. Most people will never know this because the story is buried beneath layers of textbooks, sanitized history, and government propaganda. The newspapers of the time reported minor banking meetings, nothing about the clandestine gathering that truly mattered. Official records are vague. Minutes are coded. The men involved had one purpose: to design a banking system that could never be stopped by voters, presidents, or revolutions. Here is what they done. T wants you to see the structures created in 1910 still controlled global money flows over a century later. The island was Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. 8 men met there, disguised under pseudonyms, with armed secrecy surrounding the estate. Among them were the heads of major banking families, private financiers, and influential lawmakers. They were not there to debate policy. They were there to write the rules of money itself. Most people will never know this, but the plan was to establish a central banking system capable of issuing currency, regulating credit, and controlling the economy, all while remaining outside direct government oversight. This is still happening today, and the echoes of that week can be seen in every economic crisis, every bailout, and every monetary experiment. They drafted what would eventually become the Federal Reserve Act. The language was subtle, technical, almost innocuous to the casual reader, but every clause served a singular purpose: to ensure that private interests controlled the creation of money, and by extension, the control of governments and citizens. The public was unaware. Most people will never know this, because the debate that should have happened never reached the floor of Congress in any meaningful way. By the time the act passed in 1913, the mechanism of modern banking slavery was embedded into law. This is still happening today, and your money flows through that system, whether you realize it or not. Consider the structure. The Federal Reserve is technically federal, but it is privately controlled. Member banks hold shares, elect directors, and influence monetary policy behind closed doors. The government has oversight in name only. Most people will never know this, but each financial crisis, 1929, 1970s, inflation, 2008, was exacerbated by policies flowing through this architecture. Every bail-in, every quantitative easing, every interest rate adjustment is part of a design the public cannot influence. This is still happening today, and it is built to perpetuate wealth for a few while the masses remain indebted. The historical precedent is undeniable. In the panic of 1907, the U.S. financial system teetered on collapse. Bank runs, credit freezes, and economic panic highlighted the fragility of decentralized banking. The men on Jekyll Island understood this. Most people will never know this, but their solution was to concentrate power in a central authority, privately controlled, able to print money, manipulate interest rates, and influence entire economies at will. This is still happening today, and every recession, every inflation spike, every market crash can be traced to policies flowing through that mechanism. By the 1920s and 1930s, the system had proven its power. The Great Depression allowed banks to consolidate wealth. Ordinary citizens lost life savings, homes, and livelihoods, while institutions strategically acquired assets at fire sale prices. Most people will never know this, but this pattern repeated globally: create systemic vulnerability, then capitalize on the recovery. This is still happening today, and you are seeing it again with 21st century financial crises, debt traps, and corporate bailouts. Fast forward to modern times. Central banks worldwide operate on the same principle: quantitative easing, negative interest rates, and government debt purchases are modern tools of the same architecture. Most people will never know this because the language is technical, the process is opaque, and media narratives frame it as economic management. Here's what they don't want you to see. Trillions of dollars are created digitally, lent into circulation, and charged back with interest to citizens and nations. This is still happening today, and the private control established in 1910 is the engine behind it. The 2025 to 2026 timeline reveals the system's enduring power, inflation targets, interest rate decisions, and central bank digital currency pilots all trace back to the control mechanisms laid down over a century ago. The Federal Reserve (ECB) and Bank of Japan coordinate policies globally. Most people will never know this, but every digital wallet trial, every programmable currency initiative, and every fiscal stimulus is part of a synchronized strategy to maintain centralized financial control. This is still happening today, and your wealth spending and options are already being influenced. Consider the consequences. Ordinary citizens cannot escape. Mortgages, credit cards, car loans, student debt, all are issued within this framework. Each repayment strengthens the centralized banking system. Most people will never know this, but debt is not a choice. It is a mechanism of control. This is still happening today, and the same families who met in 1910 still benefit from the system, often invisibly. What happens next? The control grows tighter. Programmable money, digital identities, and real-time transaction monitoring are coming. By 2030, much of the world could operate cashless, with financial autonomy tied directly to compliance. Most people will never know this, but the shift is underway, and those who understand it first will retain the ability to navigate it. This is still happening today, and the stakes are higher than ever. Who wins? The private banking elites, multinational institutions, and governments aligned with them. Who loses? Every ordinary citizen, small business, an independent farmer whose autonomy depends on private financial freedom. Most people will never know this, but the balance of power is already tilted. This is still happening today, and ignoring it only accelerates the loss of control. If this video woke you up, drop a like and subscribe. New forbidden truth every single day. Turn on notifications, the next one might save your wealth. Come into one thing you're doing right now to prepare. I read every single one.